The Roman legion was not merely a military unit, it was the foundational institution upon which Roman power, expansion, and political authority rested. To ask how many soldiers a legion consisted of is to ask a deceptively simple question whose answer opens into the entire logic of Roman warfare, discipline, administration, and empire building. A legion's size was never an arbitrary figure. It reflected Rome's understanding of command, logistics, moral, and social organization. It evolved over centuries as Rome transformed from a city state militia into a professional imperial war machine. In its most commonly recognized form during the late Roman Republic, particularly in the era of Julius Caesar, a legion typically consisted of approximately 4,800 to 5,200 heavy infantry soldiers. This number, however, was not fixed in stone. The legion was a living institution shaped by political needs, manpower availability, battlefield losses, recruitment practices, and the ambitions of individual commanders. Caesar's legions often varied in strength depending on campaign conditions, with some legions severely understrength and others reinforced beyond normal capacity. The classical Republican legion was organized around the principle of modular cohesion. At its smallest level was the contubernarium, a group of 8 soldiers who lived, marched, and fought together. These men shared a tent, cooked together, formed the most intimate bond within their legion. The Roman military understood that cohesion at the smallest level translated upward into battlefield resilience. A man might flee for himself, but he wouldn't hesitate to abandon the 7 men who slept beside him every night. 10 contubernia formed a century. Despite this misleading name, a century in Caesar's time consisted of 80 fighting men, not 100. Each century was commanded by a centurion, one of the most crucial figures in the Roman army. Centurions were not aristocrats. They were hardened professionals who rose through the ranks through discipline, bravery, and endurance. The strength of the Roman legion rested less on its generals, rather on the ruthless competence of its centurions who enforced order, maintained formation, and ensured that commands were executed without hesitation. 6 centuries formed a cohort, which meant that a cohort contained roughly 480 soldiers. The cohort was the primary tactical unit of the Roman legion in battle. While earlier Roman armies relied more heavily on manipular formations, by Caesar's era the cohort system had proven superior in flexibility, command control, and shock power. 10 cohorts together constituted a full legion, bringing its infantry strength to approximately 4,800 men under ideal conditions. In practice, however, legions rarely fought at full strength. Campaign losses, disease, detachment for garrison duties, desertion could reduce a legion significantly. Caesar often compensated for this by reinforcing veteran legions with new recruits or by operating legions at reduced strength while relying on their experience and morale to compensate for numerical deficits. A legion of 3,500 veterans could often outperform a full strength by inexperienced formations. Beyond the heavy infantry, a legion also included various non combatants and specialists. Engineers, medics, surveyors, armorers, and administrative staff accompanied the legion, though they were not always counted in official strength figures. In addition, legions often had a small attachment cavalry contingent. Through Roman citizen cavalry declined in importance during the late Republic was increasingly replaced by allied or auxiliary horsemen drawn from non-Roman populations. Auxiliaries were not technically part of the legion. They were essentially to its effectiveness. These troops provided cavalry, archers, slingers, and light infantry roles for the legion infantry was not decided to perform optimally. Caesar relied heavily on Gallic cavalry, Numidian horsemen, and various allied troops to complement his legions. When discussing the effective combat strength of a Roman army, one must therefore distinguish between the legion as an institution and the larger combined arms force it operated within. The size of the legion was also intimately tied to Rome's political system. In the early Republic, legions were raised annually and disbanded by after campaigns composed largely of citizen farmers who served temporarily. As Rome expanded and wars grew longer, the system became unsustainable. The Marian reforms of the late 2nd century BCE, transformed the legion into a professional standing force. Soldiers enlisted for long terms relied on their general for pay and retirement benefits, developed personal loyalty to commanders rather than abstract allegiance to the republic. The transformation had profound consequences. A legion of 5,000 soldiers under arms for years at a time was not just a military unit, it was a political instrument. When Caesar crossed the Rubicon with a single legion, he was not bringing 5,000 men into Italy. He was bringing a self contained, disciplined, battle hardened political entity whose loyalty belonged to him personally. The legion's size made it large enough to dominate cities, provinces, y- yet small enough to be tightly controlled by a single commander. Caesar's relationship with his legions illustrated how size and psychology interacted. A legion was large enough to feel like a collective identity, yet small enough for a commander to cultivate personal bonds. Caesar knew many centurions by name, addressed his soldiers directly, distributed rewards personally. This created an emotional economy in which loyalty was reinforced daily. When mutinies occurred, they were not faceless mobs but collectives of men who had fought, suffered, triumphed together under a leader they respected. The fact that a legion numbered only around 5,000 men also explains why Caesar could confront mutinous troops directly without immediate violence erupting. A mob of 5,000 disciplined soldiers is not the same as uncontrolled crowd. Roman soldiers were trained to obey hierarchy and ritual. Even in mutiny, they expected negotiation, discharge, or punishment through recognized channels. Legion structure itself imposed limits on chaos. Comparatively, the size of the Roman legion reveals Rome's unique approach to warfare. Greek hoplite armies were often larger but less flexible. Persian armies were massive but loosely organized. Later medieval armies could field tens of thousands of men, but with far less discipline or cohesion. The Roman legion occupied a strategic sweet spot, large enough to dominate tactically, small enough to maneuver operationally, and disciplined enough to act as a single organism. As Rome transitioned from republic to empire, the legion's size remained remarkably consistent. Under Augustus, legions were standardized at roughly 5,000 men, with clear pay scales, service terms, and retirement benefits. This continuity underscores how effective the legion size had proven. Rome didn't need larger units, it needed more legions. Expansions occurred horizontally through multiplication, not vertical inflation. The legion's numerical stability also simplified logistics. A commander knew exactly how much grain, equipment, and pay a legion required. Roads, supply depots, and fortifications were designed around the legion sized units. Camps were laid according to standardized dimensions that accompanied predictable number of soldiers. The Roman military was an administrative system as a fighting force, and the legion size was central to that system's efficiency. It is also important to understand that the legion size reflected Roman assumptions about human limits. 5,000 men could be trained to move, fight, and camp together without fragmenting into chaos. Beyond that number, command and control became exponentially harder without modern communication technology. Rome optimized for what human voice, visual signals, and rigid hierarchy could sustain. In symbolic terms, the legion represented Rome itself in miniature. It was a self contained society with laws, punishment, rituals, promotions, and rewards. To belong to a legion was to belong to Rome, regardless of who one was stationed. This is why mutineers, citizens, instead of soldiers, was such a devastating insult. This is why calling mutineers citizens instead of soldiers was such a devastating insult. It expelled them symbolically from a legion's identity, stripping them of honor more effectively than any threat of violence. Thus, when one asks how many soldiers a Roman legion contained, the answer is not merely numerical. A legion consisted of approximately 5,000 men because the number embodied Rome's understanding of discipline, loyalty, control, power. It was largely enough to conquer provinces and small enough commanded to be personally commanded. It was not designed for spectacle, but for endurance, not for chaos, but for order. In the end, the Roman legion was one of the history's most successful military institutions, precisely because of its size. Was neither excessive nor insufficient. It was calibrated to human psychology, political reality, and logistical constraints. Caesar didn't command legions of millions, but he didn't need to. With a handful of legions, each compact engine of violence and loyalty, he reshaped the fate of Rome, and through Rome, the trajectory of Western history.